that I grew up here in Dragon County and was raised just down the road in Troy Township. Some of you probably know my family members. My mom is Lynn Ebel. My dad was Ralph Elmer Hershberger, and I have a younger brother, Ralph Hershberger. I am a communication designer, which means I get to use a handful of my skills in one job. I'm a graphic designer, a photographer, and a writer. I started taking pictures when my mother gave me my first camera. I think I was probably 8 years old or so. And I'm pretty good at composing pictures, and I really enjoy capturing the beauty of very simple, commonplace things that most people tend to overlook. As a writer, words are very important to me. My dad was diligent in correcting my grammar as I was growing up, and he challenged me a lot about the words that I used to make sure that I was using the words that I should be using in order to convey the message that I was intending to convey. So I'm grateful for that lesson, and that has carried into my writing. I've been journaling since I could form a sentence, and I have enjoyed writing journals. I have a stack that I've completed over the years, and through the years I've written about the events in my life, the good things, bad things, my hopes, my disappointments, and my journal is a large component of what made the book Single and Content, a journey from despair to delight come to be. Through the years, as most women I think have always desired to have some form of a relationship and to hopefully maybe be married and have children one day, and I'm not an exception to that. I have been journaling my hopes and prayers for marriage and for children from the time I was a little girl. And as time has come and gone, and I find myself getting a little bit older and seeing that maybe the possibility of always being single could be a reality for me, I have struggled with that. And a few years ago, I sort of fell into a place of depression, and it was to the point where I didn't want to lift my head off the couch to go to bed at night. I was pretty disappointed with how things were not going my way, and I was sort of throwing a pity party for myself. And there were some good friends who recognized that and who I could be honest with about, and they tried to encourage me, and they directed me to some Christian materials for being a single woman, and suggested books and Bible studies and radio shows, and the common message in all of that was learning how to wait to be married, and that was not satisfying my longing. I needed to know how to be a single woman, not how to wait to be married, because marriage isn't promised to everybody, and there isn't a place in the Bible that says that everyone's going to be married someday. And so that was when I first recognized my need, or a need, for a book like Single and Content, A Journey from Despair to Delight. I recognized that somebody needed to write about how to be a single woman and how to be glad for where you are and what do you do with your singleness, and not a book about how to wait to be married. I needed to know how to live today. And so while I was still in the midst of my not understanding what God's plan and purpose was for my life, I started to write in my journal with the intention of writing a book. So you might ask me, why would you start writing about how to be single and content when you were still not content? And that's because of a verse in the Bible, Romans 8:28, and it says that God works all things out to good for those who love Him and serve Him according to His purpose. And I'm far from perfect in my love for God, but I do love God, and I believe that He has called me to serve according to His purpose. And so I trusted that that promise that He is going to work all things to good is for me. And so I rested on that, or I tried to rest on that. It took a little work to learn to rest on that. But I've also seen evidence over and over again throughout my life that God is good. And even in sour circumstances, somehow He's worked all those things for good. And it's neat. And so I knew He had done it before, and I knew He could do it again. And so while I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel in that season of my life, I knew that he was going to walk me through that rough season and get me to that light. And so that's why I wrote in the journal with the intention of writing a book about single and content without actually having achieved that yet.
It's fun.
So because I was still sort of walking through the process of learning to be content, my journaling was very real and genuine, and my frustrations were very plain. And I wasn't afraid to ask questions of God and really say, why are things the way they are? And it's neat that through months of prayer and seeing what the Bible had to say about the questions I had, that he did answer my questions. He was revealing those answers to me through the course of my wanting to know why things were the way they were. And I just want to share one example of that process with you. I really enjoy walking and praying. I get a lot of refreshment. My spirit, soul, body, everything just is refreshed by taking a nice long walk and just ironing things out and taking it to God and asking him what is going on. And so it was a nice spring day, and at that point God had really applied, he had showed me a lot of practical things and giving me understanding about a lot of practical things, like what is my purpose in being a single woman, because I was really blind to how much I can accomplish in that and how he provides for me. And so there were lots of practical things that I was learning and had already learned, but I was walking and talking to God and just saying, Lord, I have no joy. Where is my joy? And I had experienced joy before, even in the midst of some not so pleasant situations. And so I knew that I could have joy, but I just wasn't able to grab hold of it. I sang praises and hymns, old hymns to God the morning after my house burned down. And I woke up the morning after my dad died and thanked God for a great dad. And so I don't think you can really understand what that joy is, even in the time of mourning, without God, because that doesn't come from me. It's definitely from God. That is a strength that I don't have, but God has provided for me. And it's interesting that even though I've had those devastations, I guess you could call them devastations, it's part of life, that for some reason I was really struggling with being a single woman, and I just didn't understand why God hadn't given that to me. And so I struggled to have joy. I just couldn't grab hold of it. And so I was just praying to God and saying, where is my joy, God? Show me how to have joy again. I want to have joy. And a couple months prior to that, a friend had challenged me to be thankful and to thank God for one thing every day. And I had been doing that, and that was really helpful. Just making a point of saying, God, thank you for a warm bed. Thank you for good food. And I was thanking him for good things. And so as I was walking and praying, I recalled a phrase that people can find in a few places in the Bible. And it talks about offering up a sacrifice of thanksgiving. And I had never really thought about what it means to offer up a sacrifice of thanksgiving. It obviously isn't a sacrifice to thank him for good things. It's easy to thank him for good things. A sacrifice is a little more difficult. And so I thought, okay, God, I really don't want to be a single woman anymore. I want to be married. God, if you are asking me to thank you for being a single woman, then I will. And so that day, as I was walking, I just simply said, Dear God, thank you that I am a single woman today. And that was the pivotal point in my journey from despair to delight. Thanking him for something that I didn't want. Because in doing that, I recognized, as soon as I did it, I recognized that it was an act of trusting him and believing his word and going back to Romans 8:28 that says he's going to work all things for good for me. And so by saying thank you to him for something I didn't want. I was trusting him with my future. And I was trusting and believing who he is. And so that was definitely a powerful point in my journey. And it was about that time that I started to feel like, okay, it's time to take all of my journal entries and all my scraps of paper and the corners of napkins and all these things that I have been taking notes for the intention of writing the book and bring them together for a proper draft. And so about that time, I worked for myself, and I had foolishly put all my eggs into one basket with one client, and they went out of business, and so I suddenly found myself without any work at all for a good 6 months. I think it was more like 8 months. And the truth is, it was providential. It was perfect timing. It gave me an opportunity to sit down, and my job was to write this book. And that's all I got to do, is write this book. And so God was gracious to take my job away from me. It was pretty awesome. And through this process, my friend Tara, who isn't here this evening, knew what I had in mind to do. She knew that I was planning on writing this book, and she is totally goal-oriented, and I am as far from goal-oriented as anyone you might meet. She knew what I had in mind, and she spurred me on, and she held me accountable, and she checked in with me and made sure that I was keeping on task. And I am grateful for that, because I don't think this book would be where it is if not for her encouragement through that process. So when I thought the book was pretty much in a place where I couldn't nitpick it too much more, I took it to Tara, who is also very honest. She will tell me exactly what she thinks without any concern. And that's why I went to her, is because I knew I could trust her to tell me the truth and not sugarcoat anything. So I gave her my draft, and she started to read it, and she didn't even finish it, and she just looked at me and she said, "Jenny, this is good. This is great. You did it." And I thought, Tara says it's good. It's good. So I submitted it to a bunch of publishers, and fairly quickly I heard back from 3 of them, and all 3 of them said, "Yes, I want to publish your book." And at the time, I didn't realize what that meant. Like, I didn't realize that that was rare for any publishing company to get back to you that quickly, but then to have 3 say yes so quickly, and that was an honor of God. And He knows me. He knows that if I hadn't heard anything back, or if I had heard a no, I would have quit and said, "Okay, I'm done," and moved on to the next thing. And so He was gracious. God was gracious to honor me in that way, and to affirm what I have done. At least I believe that's of God. So now the book is available through a small publishing company, family run, out of South Carolina. Their name is Ambassador International, and it's only available as an electronic file, so anyone who has a computer is able to access the book. And if anybody wants to know, you can find all the information at www.singleandcontent.com. And I expect all of you to buy at least 10 copies. The neat thing about this book is I mentioned that I'm a photographer as well as a writer. And in the book, I was able to, the theme was a journey. And being a single woman is very much like wandering through the wilderness by yourself. And it can be intimidating and a little scary. And through the process of the book, you discover that God is your companion, and that it isn't scary, that He's the perfect guide, that He's the perfect protector, the perfect provider, and that I have nothing to worry about, and the whole thing is in His hands. And so really, life is a beautiful adventure, and it's nothing to be scared of. And so it's neat that I was able to incorporate some of my nature photography into the book because of the theme of wilderness and taking this journey. So I'm grateful for that. I do want to say that one of the misconceptions that people have about me writing this book is they think that because I wrote a book called Single and Content that I don't want to be married. But the truth of the matter is, I still have a deep desire for marriage. I want very much to have a companion who will love me and call me his wife, and someone who I can be a helpmate to and love and respect in return. And so, just wanted everybody to be aware of that. And I still struggle with that desire to be married. I still have a hard time sometimes waiting, and I find myself kind of crumping back into that bad place and that bad attitude. And so I have to reapply the principles that I learned through the process of writing this book. And I tell people that it's an exercise. You can't exercise just one time in your life and then be healthy for the rest of your life. You have to continue to exercise to maintain that good health. And so I'm not cured. I still have struggles sometimes, but I have the principles to keep me going and to keep my mind in the right direction and to recall that these things are good. And so, nothing else from today. I want you to know that God is good and that He loves you and that He desires to be your companion and your leader. And He's a great God, and I would love to tell you more about Him. So if anybody would like to know, just come and ask. Or just ask Him. He will give you far better answers than I can. That is the end of my presentation, and I would be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have.